I shall move on because there is an awful lot happening in and around the Middle East. You might have seen some of that update in our news bulletin. Also, as well, you'll be familiar with the fact that Hamas's deputy leader apparently was killed in an airstrike. I'm not sure anyone has currently claimed responsibility for that, but notwithstanding it, tensions are bubbling and bubbling. None other than Tony Blair. Many of you, some of the emails I cannot read out to you guys at this time of the day, but Tony Blair, now there were suggestions that perhaps he was going to be playing some kind of role in the Israel-Gaza conflict, particularly around helping Gazans leave Gaza. I have to say that was very quickly dismissed by the Tony Blair Institute. It was said that that was basically a lie and wasn't happening at all. There's a lot to unpick here. We'll get into the aspects of the Middle East and what's potentially going to happen there and the consequences and how involved the UK should be. But for now, Tony Blair, should he be anywhere, in any level, any capacity involved in foreign conflict?
He should be entering a Trappist monastery where he vows never to say another word again for the rest of his life and spends his time praying for forgiveness. I don't really see that somebody who made such a complete mess of his main foreign policy adventure should be taken seriously ever again, or should be asked for his advice, or should be treated as if he was an important player in any of these matters. Time for him to fall silent for good. The Middle East is littered with corpses, and columns of refugees still walk across it thanks to the war that he and George W. Bush created. And I just don't think there's anything further to be said by him, or honestly about him. He's done for. He did a terrible thing, and he should be sorry for it, and he should be sorry for it somewhere else in silence. And the same really should go for his propaganda chief, Alistair Campbell. Both of them really, I'm amazed that they both feel able to offer opinions on anything important anymore.
Do you share that view or a different view?
No, I entirely agree with that. And I'd also add, in addition, Tony Blair, of course, is in charge. He doesn't receive a salary, I should add, of the Tony Blair Institute. Last year, record revenues. This will make your jaw drop. $140 million.
I know, it's insane.
$140 million. Big, big business. Thousands of employees. And their revenue from overseas governments increased by 50%. We're talking Bahrain, the UAE, Saudi Arabia. And so when Blair is in the Middle East, I like to say West Asia because it's a sort of bigger area that we're talking about, really. When Tony Blair is in that part of the world, I would put a question to people watching this, listening. Whose interests is he representing? Britain's? His own? The Tony Blair Institute? Because, like I say, this is somebody now who looks at conflict, government, policy as business, as an opportunity for him to get status, for his organisation to make money. And I think that's a really important way of looking at this. And also, by the way, just in addition to that, under a potential Labour government, the Tony Blair Institute may end up being the most influential think tank in this country.
Why?
Well, because the Blair Institute is just very close to the Labour right. If you were at Labour Party conference earlier this year, you would have seen a number of panels where
There isn't a Labour right.
Leading member... OK, the less left-wing part of the Labour Party.
The right wing of the left wing, okay. There is not a Labour right.
Well, I think that's...
Hasn't been for years.
I think there's a useful... I think that's a useful formulation, but we can agree to disagree. The point is, there is a certain faction...
I never do that.
There is a certain faction of the Labour Party which is very close to the Tony Blair Institute, people in the shadow cabinet, and I am deeply concerned that there would be a think tank so influential over UK policy and foreign policy, which takes such extraordinary sums from overseas governments.
But there is a wider issue.
Hold on, let me just finish, Peter. I said one thing here.
One more.
Imagine if there was an organisation with $140 million revenues, and it was being funded by overseas governments, and it supported Brexit, or it supported left-wing causes. We would hear no end of it. James O'Brien on LBC would be having his daily aneurysm every day of the week. But because it's the Tony Blair Institute, nobody says anything. Den says, Tony Blair trying to negotiate Middle Eastern peace is like putting Guy Fawkes in charge of the annual Houses of Parliament firework display. Dave says, Michelle, I can't believe you're talking about this man. He should be in the Tower for war crimes.
I've got to say, are there anybody out there that actually thinks that this is quite a good scenario? Graham says, well, as long as he's not committing to the UK to things without the backing of his country or promising things beyond his remit, I have no problem with anyone trying to resolve issues and find peace. It can't hurt, and if it helps, then surely it's a win-win, says Graham. And Julie says, if Tony Blair can bring peace to the situation in the Middle East, then it is a good thing. Despite what people may think of him from his past history, it's about collectively bringing to a peaceful conclusion a very different situation.
Why should anybody think that he was qualified to do that? He has. There is no reason to believe that he's qualified to do that. On the one occasion where he had to choose between peace and war, and where it was pretty obvious that an awful lot of people thought war was extremely inadvisable, he pursued with immense vigour the course of war, and that's what he favoured. And it was a war that he didn't even need to join. The Americans actually told him, it's all right. If you can't get the support of your people in your parliament, you can stay out. And he still carried on wanting to do it. This was a man who wanted war. The wider issue in this is there used to be a time when politicians, when they ended their political careers, went out of public life. In fact, when Harry Truman ceased to be President of the United States, he had nothing to live on except his army pension from the First World War. And they had to get up a special fund to create a pension for the President of the United States, who previously, I don't think, had got one. Now, every single president who goes out of office, every prime minister who goes out of office, is immediately surrounded by people waving money at them and setting up these institutes and other bodies and going around the world making speeches and becoming influential. Now, what is the actual outcome of this in politics if someone during a political career, when they're paid a not particularly big but substantial by most people's salary for doing their job, what they're really worrying about is how much money they'll make when they leave the job? And given that most prime ministers and presidents nowadays seem to leave their jobs quite young, aren't we entitled to worry about where all this money is coming from and whether it is in fact influencing their implementation of policy and their acts in government before they get this money? They're already wondering what they're going to get in this magical world of post-office statesmanship where they all become rich. I think it's a very serious problem, and it must influence their behaviour. I think it should be examined much more closely, and actually I think it should stop.
What do you think? I mean, when we talk about ex-PMs and all the rest of it making a lot of money, I always think about Liz Truss, 40-odd days, and all of the kind of fruits that she will go on to enjoy. Anyway, back to the Middle East. You know, things really are, tensions there really are inflaming. You don't mind me saying you're part Iranian. How concerned are you about things at the moment?
I think we could be sleepwalking into something really serious. And one of the counter-histories of the last 30 years, which people don't really think about, is that, of course, we've had failed states, war across West Asia, Central Asia, bits of North Africa, but it hasn't been that big. So we've had a failed state in Libya. It's only a couple of million people. Afghanistan, very far away. Iraq, not a large country. But the prospect of a failed state in Iran or Egypt, between them, that's 200 million people. If you're worried about refugees coming to Europe, displaced people, that's a lot of people. And I think that prospect, it's not likely, but it's possible. I don't think people are alive to it. And I think there are certain politicians out there who'd be cheering on, or political figures, media figures, whatever, who'd be cheering on, let's go to war with Iran, nuke Iran. And then when you have tens of millions of people coming to Europe, which is what would happen, they would say, well, don't let them in, we've done nothing wrong. We have enough chaos, volatility in the world without having to go around causing more. And I think that we need to tread very carefully with this. That doesn't mean you do everything Iran says, but you have to start with a very simple question, which is, what is Britain's interest in West Asia? And what is our strategy? I don't know what our strategy in West Asia is, and I don't know how our interests are being represented. Right now is, oh, the White House wants to bomb some people, we'll go bomb them too. I don't think that's good enough. And finally, you know, the United States is very lucky because it's insulated by two giant oceans. When they make screw-ups in the Middle East, Europe is the one that has to pay. The displaced people come here, the energy inflation comes here. The US is fine, they export gas to Europe, they're loving it. So these are really serious times and questions for people right across Europe, including Britain. And I think we should not write off the possibility of war. Now, I don't think we'll go to war with Iran. There is not a world war, but we are increasingly a world at war. And that's going to have serious consequences.
Do you agree?
Largely, yes. I think that's more or less right. I am astonished. I know little about the Middle East. I've travelled there a bit. I don't claim to any special knowledge, but I am absolutely astonished by the absence of knowledge, indeed positive ignorance of almost every political statement made by most political figures in the West about it. People who before Iraq didn't know the difference between a Shia and a Sunni Muslim, people who know nothing of the history of Iran. People in this country, for instance, do not know that in 1953 we overthrew the legitimate government of Iran in pursuit of our own oil interests, something which is still hugely resented there, and in my view quite rightly. And this isn't some kind of conspiracy theory fantasy. The details of it are available at the George Washington University in the American capital. The CIA have released the details of this putsch, which was organised by a man who later became a British Conservative MP, Monty Woodhouse, and by the grandson of Theodore Roosevelt, President of the United States, a man called Kermit Roosevelt, who actually arranged and organised this thing and overthrew Mohammad Mossadegh, who's Iran's legitimate prime minister, purely in pursuit of oil revenue. And this shocking thing still influences, obviously, hugely the Iranian attitude towards this country in the West. And if you don't even begin to know things like this, or that the immense resentment in Iran over what they call the imposed war, when the West encouraged Saddam Hussein to attack Iran in a war which was for them very like the First World War was for us, the cemeteries outside Iran of the war dead are appallingly huge. We just speak of Iran as a bogeyman. I don't like the rulers of Iran any more than anybody else does. But we have to remember this is a serious country with a lot of people in it who would be sympathetic to the West if they were given the chance, but whom we make enemies of.
Indeed. Let me ask you, how concerned are you about matters in the Middle East? Is it something on your radar? And to Aaron's point, what do you think the British strategy is? Do you think we have one? Have we got the right people in charge? And the next potential government, perhaps Keir Starmer, would he do a better job, in your mind, when it comes to managing foreign conflicts?